In this video, you'll discover the inspiring story of George, a mechanic from Florida who completely transformed his life using just a 10-minute daily routine and the timeless wisdom of Florence Scovel Shinn. Once a humiliated employee, George rose to become the proud owner of his own garage. His journey is living proof that true wealth begins in the mind and reveals itself in reality. Watch until the end because you too can take the first step today. Comment below. I choose to see with faith too. Chapter 1. Under pressure but still standing. George Whitaker woke up every day at 6 a.m., without even needing an alarm clock. The hum of the old ceiling fan was a mechanical whisper, as familiar as the weight he carried in his chest since splitting his days between hard labor at the auto shop and night classes at Florida Polytechnic University. At 36, he no longer saw himself as a promising young man, just someone trying to survive and build something better while time raced ahead. Married to Carol, age 30, and father to Arthur, a bright 6-year-old boy, George lived in a modest 2-story home in Lakeland, Florida. No luxury but no debt either. Bills were paid, the fridge was full, and the rent was current. Still, month after month, the ending balance was always the same: zero. Not a single dollar left. The exhaustion in his body was one thing, but the real drain was silent. It came from the feeling that no matter how hard he worked, he was just running in place. He'd been working for 5 years under Mr. Alfred Monroe, a 58-year-old man who had inherited his first auto shop from his father and now ran 3 of them with an iron fist. Arrogant, impatient, and always in a rush, Alfred treated his employees like disposable parts. And even though George was the most skilled and the customer's favorite, he was not spared from Alfred's rudeness. "Why don't you have your own shop, George?" It was a question he heard often from customers. Many of them said, "I only bring my car here because of you." And while those words warmed his heart for a moment, they quickly turned into sharp blades of frustration. Because George asked himself the same question. And the answer was always the same. "I don't have the money. I don't have the connections. I've got a family to support. It's too late." That morning seemed like any other, until a new customer walked in with an old BMW and eyes like a hawk. Mr. Gunther Weber, a German businessman who owned a metalworks company nearby. Polite but direct, George personally handled the car's inspection. He was nearly finished when, out of nowhere, Alfred stormed into the shop, shouting unjustly about a supposed delay. "This isn't a classroom, it's a workshop. If you can't prioritize, then walk out," he bellowed right in front of everyone. The silence that followed was brutal. George lowered his head. Gunther raised an eyebrow. Later, as George handed back the keys, he apologized for the scene. But Gunther, steady-eyed, replied, "You're excellent at what you do. Humiliation should never be part of your paycheck." He paused, then pulled a leather business card holder from his pocket and handed George a card. "Call me. I'd like to talk. Something tells me you don't belong here." George took the card like someone holding a mysterious compass. Something had shifted that day. Chapter 2. The card, the courage, and the invitation. The card had been sitting on the coffee table for 2 days, right next to a chipped mug and a small stack of unopened bills. George glanced at it from time to time, like someone staring at a locked door. Gunther Weber, CEO, Weber Precision Auto Parts, Tampa, Florida. The card's sleek design felt completely out of place in the modest living room, like it belonged to another world. A world George wasn't sure he'd be welcome in. Carol, sitting on the couch with their son Arthur asleep in her lap, asked for the 3rd time, "Why haven't you called him yet?" He said he wanted to talk. George sighed, his eyes heavy with fatigue. Grease still caked into his fingers. Doubt throbbed in his chest. What if he was just being polite? What if it's nothing? And what if it's the beginning of everything? Carol replied, with the calm certainty of someone who sees beyond the noise. "George, maybe you've been waiting your whole life for this nothing to show up." Those words were the push he didn't know he needed. The next morning, with Arthur at school and Carol off to work, George took a breath. He picked up the phone, dialed the number with shaky hands. Gunther answered almost immediately. "George, I've been waiting for your call. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I want to share an idea with you." In the glassy reception area of Weber Precision, George felt completely out of place, surrounded by crisp suits and the smell of gourmet coffee. But Gunther greeted him with a warm, welcoming smile. They talked at length. George shared his story, a humble childhood in Ocala, his late start at a state university, sleepless nights, a tough job, and one dream: owning his own shop. He spoke without complaint, with a raw honesty that made an impression. Gunther listened closely. When George finished, there was a pause. Then Gunther opened a drawer and pulled out a small maroon book with gold lettering on the cover. "This book changed my life. And it might just change yours. If you're ready to read it. Not with your eyes, but with your heart." George looked at the title. "The Game of Life and How to Play It." Florence Scovel Shinn. "You're giving me a book?" he asked, surprised. "For now, yes. I'm flying to Berlin tonight. I'll be back in 20 days. Until then, I want you to read it. Just 10 minutes a day. It doesn't sound like much. But trust me, it's enough. When I get back, we'll talk again." George took the book like it was an ancient map. It wasn't what he expected. But something inside him trusted Gunther. And more than that, trusted what this might lead to. On his way out, George looked up at the clear Tampa sky. And for the first time in a long time, he felt that something invisible had begun to shift. Chapter 3: 10 Minutes a Day. George came home that night holding the small book like it was some kind of sacred artifact. Carol immediately noticed something different in his eyes. "Did he offer you a job?" she asked. George shook his head, still a bit unsure. "Not exactly. He gave me a book. Asked me to read it for 10 minutes a day. Said he'd talk to me when he got back from his trip." Carol raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "A book?" George sat down at the kitchen table, opened the first page, and read the title again. "The Game of Life and How to Play It." He couldn't help but laugh at the irony. He could barely manage the game of survival, let alone life. Still, he took a deep breath and started reading. "Man can change conditions by changing the words he speaks." Florence Scovel Shinn. The sentence shook him. He had always believed in physical effort, in sweat, in long hours at work. Now he was being challenged to consider the power of words. It all sounded far too mystical for the logical mind of a mechanic and aspiring engineer. But he made himself a promise. He'd try. And he did. Over the next few days, George started waking up 30 minutes earlier. With the city still asleep and the smell of coffee in the air, he read silently for 10 minutes. Sometimes he'd read the same page 2 or 3 times. It wasn't easy to understand. But one line kept echoing in his mind. Every word has power and manifests in the visible world. He started paying attention to the words he used at work. In the garage, instead of complaining about his boss, he'd quietly murmur to himself, "I am guided to the right opportunity at the right time. Abundance finds me." First he felt silly, but also strangely good. An old customer, Mr. Morales, brought in his car and said, "George, you really should open your own shop. You know that, right?" George smiled. He didn't respond with the usual "I wish." Instead, he simply said, "It's going to happen. I'm getting ready." The words came out effortlessly, almost like a prophecy. Not because he believed them completely, but because he wanted to believe. And Florence seemed to promise that was enough to begin. That night, Carol said, "You're different. Less tired. You even look taller." He laughed. "Must be the new posture. Chest out, chin up, lighter soul." Carol walked over and hugged him. "Keep reading that book, even if it doesn't make sense yet." Then George did something he had never done before. He wrote his first affirmation on a piece of paper and stuck it to the bathroom mirror. My garage already exists in the divine plan. It manifests at the right time in the perfect way. Every day after brushing his teeth, he read it out loud. 10 minutes, 1 page, 1 sentence, 1 step. That was it. But George felt like finally he was playing a different kind of game. Chapter 4. The pieces start to move. 20 days had passed. George was reading the final chapter of the book when the phone rang. It was Mr. Gunther's number. "Good afternoon, George. I'm back from my trip. Are you available tomorrow morning? I'd like to meet with you at the company headquarters." "Absolutely, sir. I'll be there." As he hung up, George felt his heart race. Over the past 20 days, that little book had shaken his entire foundation. He had gone from merely repeating affirmations to actually feeling the truth behind the words. He began to picture himself in his own auto shop. His name on the front, brand new tools, customers walking in and praising his work. He didn't know how, but he had stopped obsessing over the how. Imagination is the treasure of the heart. Florence Scovel Shinn. The next morning, he put on his best dress shirt and headed to the address he'd been given. It was a sleek, modern building, the headquarters of Gunther Precision, a mid-sized metalworks company in North Tampa, Florida. The receptionist led him to a conference room. Within minutes, Mr. Gunther walked in with a wide smile. "George, have a seat. First of all, thank you for reading the book. You did read it, right?" "Yes, sir. Every day. 10 minutes each morning." Gunther nodded with satisfaction. "Then you understand that before any physical workshop exists, the real shop is born here." He pointed to George's head. "And here," he added, tapping his chest. George smiled, moved by the simplicity of the message. "Yes, sir. I've started to change the way I think, and more importantly, the way I talk about myself." Gunther got straight to the point. "I don't usually make offers like this, but you're one of those people who lights up the room. I want to introduce you to my partner, Mr. Estevan Blake. He's our chief engineer and is expanding our automotive maintenance division, truck fleets and electric vehicles. We're looking for someone with both hands-on experience and academic training." Your name came up naturally. George's eyes widened. "But I haven't graduated yet. I finish in 2 months." "Perfect. Our offer is for you to start as a technical supervisor, at a salary 3 times what you're earning now. We'll be flexible with your hours until you graduate. And more importantly, I want you to save up, because I know you have a dream." George swallowed hard. The room fell into a kind of reverent silence. "I don't know what to say. Just say yes, if you're ready to play the game of life with the right cards. Doors open to those who know they exist." Florence Scovel Shinn. George walked out of that building a different man. It wasn't just a new job, it was a new position on the game board of life. On the way home, he drove past the old garage. Mr. Alfred was yelling at an employee on the phone. The contrast was striking. George didn't feel anger, just gratitude. That place had taught him exactly who he didn't want to be. That night, he told Carol and little Arthur. The 3 of them embraced on the old living room couch. A simple room now filled with hope. "So you're going to work with that man from the factory?" Arthur asked. "Yes, son. And one day, we'll have our own garage." Carol squeezed his hand. "You started dreaming. And now life is answering." George looked at the affirmation still taped to the bathroom mirror and smiled. For the first time, it didn't feel like a wish anymore. Felt like truth. Chapter 5. The workshop seed. George started the new job the following week. His badge read, Technical Supervisor, Maintenance Division. A title that felt almost too heavy for someone who, just days ago, could barely imagine life outside Mr. Alfred's garage. But he remembered what he'd read. Man can change his conditions by changing his words. Florence Scovel Shinn. So instead of saying, "I don't know if I can handle this," he began each morning declaring, Everything I need to know is revealed to me. The right path opens before me. In practice, the challenges were real. Managing a team of seasoned engineers and mechanics, handling budgets, timelines, meetings. At night, he still had university, now in its final stretch. But something in George had shifted. He was grounded in a quiet certainty. He was exactly where he was meant to be. With a new salary, life at home improved. Carol started smiling more often. Arthur got a blue bicycle, something he'd been asking for months. And slowly, George began to save. Nothing dramatic, but enough to feel that yes, the dream of the garage was no longer just a distant illusion. One Saturday afternoon, while cleaning the backyard, he found an old cardboard box in the laundry room closet. Inside were his first mechanic books, notes from vocational school, and a worn-out notebook where he'd once sketched the design for G&C Auto Repair. George and Carol. He smiled. The desires of a man's heart are seeds planted by the Spirit. Florence Scovel Shinn. He sat in a garden chair and began flipping through Florence's book once again. It had become a daily ritual, 10 minutes a day without fail. More than reading, it was a practice of reconnecting with his inner power. The following Monday, something unexpected happened. Mr. Estevam called him into the glass-walled office overlooking the factory yard. "George, we've got a technical issue with a batch of parts. Faulty sensors. We need to coordinate logistics with a supplier in California and oversee quality testing here. It's a lot of responsibility, but I trust you." George felt the weight of it, but replied without hesitation, "You can count on me." As he organized the tasks, he noticed something had shifted. It wasn't just technical skill anymore. It was a calm confidence, as if something bigger were guiding it all. That night, as they lay in bed, Carol rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not the same," she whispered. "You speak differently, walk differently. Even your breathing has changed." He smiled. "Maybe I've started to believe. In yourself. In myself. In God. In the game of life." And in that quiet moment, Carol understood what he meant. There was something sacred about watching someone bloom. Not by luck but by decision. Chapter 6. 10 minutes a day. Friday dawned hot and heavy in Tampa, and George woke up earlier than usual. Not out of obligation but anticipation. The night before, he had received a message from Mr. Gunther. "George, I'm back from my trip. Lunch tomorrow at the restaurant next to Gunther Precision. Noon." The simple invitation made George's stomach twist, not from fear but from expectation. During the 3 weeks Gunther had been away, George had not only embraced his new role with commitment, but had also fully immersed himself in the book he'd been given, The Game of Life and How to Play It. He had followed the advice to the letter, 10 minutes a day with an open heart. Some nights, after putting Arthur to bed, he'd sit on the couch with the book in his lap, Carol beside him, curious, sometimes just listening in silence. Florence's words felt like they had traveled through time to speak directly to him. Man can change outer conditions by changing only his way of thinking. The words you speak produce miracles or disasters. You receive what you imagine. Those ideas kept echoing in his mind, especially as he faced real-world challenges. Technical issues, delays, team arguments, but for the first time George remained calm. He no longer saw himself as the humiliated worker under Mr. Alfred. Now he was a man who knew where he was going. At exactly noon, George parked his car and crossed the street to the modern restaurant with a glass facade. Gunther was already waiting at a reserved table, reading a newspaper. "George!" he exclaimed with a smile, standing to greet him. "Good to see you again. How's everything going?" "I'm adapting, sir. Honestly, it's been more challenging than I expected, but also far more inspiring." Gunther nodded, pleased. "And the book? Did you get to read it?" George smiled and pulled out a worn copy from his backpack, filled with colorful sticky notes. "I did. 10 minutes a day. First, I found it strange, almost mystical. But after a while, I began to realize how much of it made sense. The idea that my mind is creative, that I can shape my reality through my words, actions, and faith, changed everything. Gunther was silent for a moment, watching George with a thoughtful expression. You know, I started with that book too. My wife gave it to me. I was bankrupt back in Berlin. And it was that reading that helped me start over here, in the US. George's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Yes. Gunther Precision was born from a simple idea, but with faith applied daily. As Florence says, opportunities come when one is prepared. After lunch, as they walked back toward the company building, Gunther stopped suddenly and asked, "George, what are you preparing for?" The question hung in the air. George looked up at the bright blue Florida sky, took a deep breath and replied, "For my own shop. I've always dreamed of it. But now, it's not just a dream anymore. I feel like it's getting closer." Gunther gave a knowing smile. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. That day, George walked back into the company with a different step. He no longer carried the weight of doubt, only the lightness of someone who, little by little, is creating his own destiny. Chapter 7: Signs of a Greater Future. Friday dawned with thin clouds hanging over Tampa. George woke up before the alarm, his mind racing. He put on his blue Gunther Precision shirt, had breakfast with Carol, who seemed more energized with the new pace of their home, and dropped Arthur off at school. On the way, his son asked with curious eyes, "Daddy, is it true that now you're the boss?" George smiled. "Yeah, something like that. But every boss has to work hard too, son." Arthur nodded, as if he understood, and ran off toward the schoolyard. Back in the car, George paused for a few seconds, looking up at the sky. The invisible is moving, he thought. It was a strange feeling of expansion, as if he were being drawn toward a place bigger than he could yet see. At the company, the day was intense. The issue with the defective sensors was nearly resolved, thanks to the fast communication George had established with a supplier and the internal team. He was beginning to be recognized. He received "good job" comments in the hallways and was asked for his opinion in meetings. During lunch, he sat in the back garden with a copy of Florence Scovel Shinn's book that Mr. Gunther had lent him. He had developed the habit of reading it for 10 minutes a day, as suggested. That day, he underlined a sentence that hit him deeply. Man can change his environment, change his conditions in life, by changing his words. Back at the office, he started thinking about the way he spoke about his life. He had always said things were hard, that one day he'd have his own shop, but always with a tone of resignation. For the first time, he realized that his words were shaping his reality. That same afternoon, Mr. Gunther appeared at his door. He was wearing a light gray suit and had a calm expression. "George, the logistics reports reached me. Excellent work. I told you I trusted you, and you're proving me right." "Thank you, sir. I'm giving it my best." Gunther stepped closer and, as if reading his thoughts, added, "You still think about having your own shop, don't you?" George was surprised. "Yes, it's my biggest dream. Stay here a while longer. Build your capital, learn more. I have plans. But everything in its time." That phrase echoed like a quiet promise. George felt something stir in his chest. It wasn't just a compliment. It was as if the universe were setting the stage for something much greater. On the way home, he turned on the radio, and an old song started to play. Carol loved that song. He smiled to himself, grateful. And for the first time, he dared to say out loud, still sitting in the car, "My shop already exists. It's coming to me." Yes, maybe you are in a moment like that, when you can't see how your dream could possibly come true. But the ways of God are wider than our eyes can see. If this story touched you so far, leave a comment saying, "My shop will come too." And don't forget to like the video. It helps this message reach those who need it. George didn't know the exact day or the place, but deep down he knew. The invisible was already at work. Chapter 8: The Unexpected Customer. That Monday, the Gunther Precision Workshop was quieter than usual. It was the beginning of the month, a period when most orders were concentrated at the company's headquarters, and the maintenance division experienced a slower pace. George took advantage of the morning to review technical inventory and catch up on pending reports. Around 10 o'clock, he got a call from reception. "Mr. George, there's a client here asking to speak with you in person. He said he knows you from Mr. Alfred's shop." George furrowed his brow. "Can you ask him to come up, please?" A few minutes later the door opened, and in walked Mr. Bernard Miller, a retired man who had been one of George's most loyal clients for years. A soft-spoken man with tired eyes, but still a sharp, steady gaze. "George, I'm glad you received me. I found out by chance that you were working here. A friend of mine in deliveries mentioned you had switched jobs. Great to see you, Mr. Bernard. Please make yourself comfortable. What can I do for you?" The older man sat down carefully. "I've got an old Buick 97 that needs an electrical and structural tune-up. I don't trust just anyone, you know that. So I came here to ask, can you take the job?" George took a deep breath. That question transported him, for a few seconds, back to his old workbench, to the sweaty days, the smell of oil, and the feeling of being useful with his own hands. "Well, Mr. Bernard, I don't take personal repair jobs here. I supervise an industrial maintenance line. But maybe I can figure something out." "George," the old man said, leaning forward, "I'm not here looking for a discount. I'm here looking for your trust. Just tell me how much and when. Money isn't the issue." That conversation echoed in George's mind for the rest of the day. It was more than just a service request. It was a clear sign that the universe was beginning to move people toward him, without him even asking. That night at home he told Carol everything. She listened closely, a mix of surprise and excitement on her face. Love. Could this be the beginning? I mean, an old client coming to you like that, out of nowhere. Yeah. And the funny thing is, just yesterday I declared that my workshop already exists. Carol smiled and gently touched his hand. Maybe it's already being born, and we just haven't noticed yet. George thought about the garage at home. Small, but big enough for a workbench. He also thought about Florence's book, where he had read, "Nothing stays the same. The door opens to something much better." He didn't know when or how, but something inside him had changed. Now, he was beginning to see possibilities where he used to see limitations. Before going to sleep, he checked his phone. A new YouTube notification popped up. "If you believe your transformation has already started, comment, 'My door is already opening.' And don't forget to like and share this video." George chuckled quietly. It was as if the universe itself were sending messages from every direction. The next day he would call Mr. Bernard. And maybe, just maybe, he'd take out his old toolbox from the garage. Chapter 9. The Invisible Workshop. George spent his entire Saturday cleaning out the garage. He sweated, coughed through the dust, stacked old boxes, and dismantled rusty shelves. By late afternoon, the concrete floor, once buried under clutter and years of neglect, looked completely different. There was now space for a workbench, a jack stand, maybe even a small lift someday. But for now, what mattered was the first step. On Sunday, he used his first performance bonus from Gunther Precision to buy a few new tools. When he got home and unboxed the hydraulic jack, he felt something close to reverence. This wasn't just a tool, it was a symbolic key, unlocking a new reality. The following week, Mr. Bernard's car arrived at George's home garage. The old Buick still ran with dignity, but it was clearly tired. George smiled as he lifted the hood. It felt almost poetic, an old car placing its trust in a dream that was just beginning. He worked on it during his free hours, after work and on weekends. Carol made snacks. Arthur watched from a distance, curious, as his father worked with gloves and a flashlight strapped to his head. George didn't say much, but inside he felt more alive than he had in years. When he returned the car to Mr. Bernard, The old man opened his wallet without hesitation. But George refused the payment. "This one's a gift. You were the first to believe in me." The old man gripped his hand firmly. "Then know this gift will return to you multiplied. You can count on it." The next day, at Gunther Precision, Mr. Gunther called George into an informal meeting. "George, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever thought about starting something of your own?" George smiled at the irony. "Every single day." Gunther leaned back in his chair. "I've been watching you, your growth, your leadership, your commitment. You're different. You don't think like an employee. You think like an owner." George didn't respond right away. He just listened. "I'm entering a new phase with the company. Planning to open a new division focused on advanced maintenance in East Tampa. And I'm looking for someone I trust to lead it. Someone who could operate with full freedom, even as a partner if you want." George's eyes widened. "You're offering me a partnership. I'm offering you a seed. Whether you plant it or not, that's your choice. Talk it over with your wife. But don't take too long. The land's already bought." That night, George couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from gratitude. Every line from Florence's book now held deeper meaning. The invisible is always working in your favor, as long as you don't stray from what is good. His garage had no sign, no business cards, no listing. But the workshop already existed, first in his heart and now, slowly, in the hearts of others too. The next morning, before he left for work, Carol handed him an envelope. "I found this yesterday, tucked away with our wedding stuff. Remember this letter?" He opened it. It was an old, yellowed sheet of paper where, years ago, he'd written his dream. "To have my own workshop, where I'll be respected and do what I love." George held the paper in his hands for a long time. "It's happening, Carol. It's really happening." She nodded, eyes full of tears. "Because you never gave up." Sparkles, if you also feel like something invisible is working in your favor, leave a comment below. My reality has already started to change. And if this story has touched your heart, like, share and subscribe to the channel. The final chapter is coming, and you won't want to miss it. Chapter 10. The Workshop That Always Was. 3 months had passed since that conversation with Mr. Gunther. George was now splitting his time between Gunther Precision and his own garage, where the number of clients, referred by old acquaintances and new admirers, kept growing steadily. With Gunther's support, a small warehouse in Tampa East's industrial district was being renovated. It would soon become the home of Jones Precision Auto, a name suggested by Carol and unanimously approved by the family. The initial investment was fully covered by Gunther, under one simple agreement. George would have total freedom to manage, hire and expand, and could gradually buy into his share over the years, no pressure, no interest. "Soulful businesses don't need suffocating clauses," Gunther said with a smile as he signed the contract. George hired 2 old college friends, and the following month Alfred, his former boss, needed an urgent part for a rare European car. His usual supplier had failed him. George, now with direct access to manufacturers, solved it within 24 hours. Alfred came in person to pick it up. "So, this is your shop?" he asked. George simply nodded at peace. There was no arrogance, no need for revenge. Only truth. "Congratulations," Alfred said, glancing around, trying to mask the discomfort in his eyes. That night, George stayed late, finishing the installation of a new ceiling light. When he turned off the switch and looked around the dim, quiet space, he whispered, "I've always seen this, long before it existed." Back home, Arthur ran up holding a piece of paper. "Dad, look. I drew your shop." George smiled at the childish drawing, a garage with a sign above it and a bright light shining overhead. In the corner, 3 stick figures holding hands. "This one's me," George asked. "That's you, Mommy, and me. We fixed the cars together." Carol appeared in the doorway, leaning softly against the frame, smiling in silence. That night, like he had every night since the beginning, George took 10 quiet minutes before bed to read Florence's book. Just 10 minutes. That's all it ever took. He sat in silence, took a deep breath and read, "Patience is God's timing. The harvest comes when the soil is ready." He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how to see the invisible and believe in it." His workshop was no longer invisible. It was real, filled with machines, tools, and people. But more than anything, it was filled with purpose. And George knew with absolute clarity, this was just the beginning. Because now he wasn't seeing with his eyes. He was seeing with faith. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, write in the comments. I choose to see with faith too. And remember, you can change your life with just 10 minutes a day, just like George did. Like, share this video and subscribe to the channel. We have many more transformational stories coming, guided by the timeless wisdom of Florence Scovel Shinn. George started out as an ordinary man, hard-working, dedicated, yet stuck within the limits the world kept placing on him. His dream of owning his own auto shop felt distant, almost impossible. But everything changed with just 10 minutes a day. Fueled by faith and persistence, through the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn, George discovered that prosperity doesn't come from sheer effort, but from the harmony between action and spiritual awareness. He realized that words carve out pathways, and that visualizing his dream with heart was the first invisible brick in a very real foundation. His story isn't just about cars, tools, or professional success. It's about the power to choose a vision beyond current circumstances. And now, George is living what once seemed out of reach, a life of purpose, abundance, and peace. If George did it, why not you? See you in the next episode of Shinn's Spiritual Truths.